Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how are you doing?
Good. Get to go cover a night game, which will be great. Get to stay in the horseshoe till like 2, 3 in the morning. Should be fantastic.
It is always great being there that late and just a nice quiet evening in the shoe. It won't always be quiet. Come about 7:44 with the kickoff, things will start to get crazy. So, Ohio State and Michigan State this week. The Spartans come into town. I think, did they just drop out of the ratings this week because of this game?
They are shared with someone else, Arizona State or something. They're co-number 25 in the media poll.
Co-number 25. Yes. Again, with the team that beat them.
I think it was Michigan State. There's someone else, yeah.
I have not looked at the rankings at all.
That's because the rankings are pretty much pointless at this point in the season?
Exactly why. But this will be, and we say this, I think we've said it every single week except for the Miami week. This is going to be a bigger test for the Buckeyes. This is going to be a more significant test, especially for the Ohio State offense. We talked to Ryan Day today. He had his radio show that we talked to him for about 5-6 minutes. Not a lot was said other than the fact that, yes, surprise, surprise, Tom, this will be the best defense that the Buckeyes have faced this season. What a shock, considering the Spartans are usually the best defense the Buckeyes play every year. And they come into this one with much of the same defense they had last year. And that same defense shut the Buckeyes down in the first half, pretty much up in East Lansing. So this is not going to be an easy game at all. But it's going to give us a really good look at the potential of this offense. And we've only seen portions of it. But this gives us a better idea of what this offense will be able to do, I think, this season.
Yeah, this is a little bit like last week's game against Nebraska, where you knew this was probably not going to be a game that Ohio State was in any real danger of losing, but one side of the ball for the opponent was good enough that it was like, oh, this could be kind of interesting to see how they stack up against this half of this other team. Last week it was the Nebraska offense. You knew the Nebraska defense wasn't great, but it was kind of interesting to see how they matched up against that Nebraska skill talent last week. And they obviously they did just fine. That was not a big concern last week. This week it's the Michigan State defense. Michigan State offense, I think, kind of is what it is. It's not flashy. It's not. I think the technical term is good. It's not good. But it's like, they're okay, and they can put 40 points up against Indiana if they need to.
Well, if they need to, and they needed to.
But against Arizona State, which is, Arizona State's a good team, but they're not an Ohio State caliber team. Michigan State put up, 10 points, 7 points, something like that.
7.
And it was like, well, they could have had more. Like, yes, they could have had 2 field goals that they missed, and then they could have 13 points.
Right.
Like, wow, that's
good job.
Good. That's good. That's almost 20, which is almost 30, which is almost 40. So, I mean, it was practically another 40-point game.
Another shootout, a 10-7 shootout that they weren't able quite to win. As with everything, it starts up front, and that's Kenny Willekes at defensive end. And it's the same defensive line pretty much from last year with Raekwon Williams up front as well, and the Panashek brothers in there. We don't know anything about Brandon Bowen yet. His availability, I think they feel better than they maybe did a week ago about Josh Allaby, even though they are very comfortable with him. But him getting the nod as a player of the game last week I think a lot of it, from what Ryan Day has said, has just been the fact that he stayed. And he hasn't gone anywhere, and he's had a great attitude. And in the era of the portal, as Day puts it, Josh Allaby stuck it out, and so they wanted to reward him, but he also played very well. He had, I think, a team high in Buckeye leaves this past week, sharing it with a couple of other players. But if Brandon Bowen can't go, they're going to feel pretty good about what they have in this offensive line. But Allaby or Brandon Bowen or Thayer Munford, whenever Kenny Willekes is up against them, we saw him terrorizing the Buckeyes last year. He's got, I think his numbers are decent, but we know the talent that he has and that he'll bring to the game on Saturday.
Right. His numbers are decent, but let's just before we get into Kenny Willekes, let's have a moment of Chase Young appreciation. Kenny Willekes, who is kind of the standout player on a very good defense, 5 games this year, same as Chase Young, 6.5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. Like, oh, that's pretty good.
Pretty good.
That's pretty good. Chase Young has twice as many sacks.
Well,
so, I mean, Kenny Willekes is someone who is... There are not that many people on other teams that you get the sense that Ohio State's defense would be like, oh, yeah, we would take him and we would play him somewhere and he would have a role on this team. He's one of those guys. And when you look at a team playing a backup tackle, that would normally be like, oh, that's potentially a mismatch. It doesn't seem like there's an ounce of concern on the Ohio State side of things that, they have been respectful of Willekes and they know he's a good player. Pretty sure Brian Day talked about him on Tuesday.
Yeah.
And, they obviously respect him and he's someone that you're going to know where he is on the field. I don't get the sense that that's something they're remotely worried about. And that's just a tribute to Josh Allaby and how he's played in his two opportunities, the Rose Bowl and then last week in Nebraska. It's just been very solid. He's been good in the pass game. He's been good in the run game. He's just handled his business. He was the offensive player of the week last week. I mean, that's pretty darn good for someone who came in and, presumably didn't know for sure that he was going to play until right before the game. To just be able to step in on the road against, a hostile environment, against decent defense, and just, no problems, no big deal. That's the kind of depth that most teams don't have, and that's the kind of thing that will kind of fly under the radar a little bit, but really makes a big difference in terms of just having that consistent performance every week, where you don't have that one week where it's like, oh, we had a guy out and we really missed him, and that really showed up on the scoreboard. And sometimes it's a close game, sometimes it's a loss. That's the kind of stuff that derails the season. Last week in Nebraska, it was just like, yeah, it's fine, no big deal.
Yeah, they went on about their offense as if there were no backups in. Mm-hmm. They ran to the right plenty, and in key situations. When I asked Day about what's it like to deal with preparing for a guy like Chase Young, that's when he mentioned Kenny Willekes, and he said you can't focus too much on it because then you leave other areas open, but you still have to worry about it. And he said that's the art of coaching, is getting that balance right. And they've been pretty good with that art of coaching to this point. And it'll be fun to watch, to see what they do. Do they help out? Who do they help out? But I think he's going to get in there, and he's going to create some problems. And Justin Fields won't have as much time as he normally has. And I still think sometimes he's a little late to get rid of the ball, but he does get out of the pocket quickly enough. It's just sometimes he still keeps the ball while he's out of the pocket.
Yeah.
I think he's going to have to be quicker in everything this week against not just Willekes, but also the Michigan State blitzing, and obviously they'll have to do a good job of picking those guys up. He's just not going to have as much time as he normally has, and sometimes even when he has a lot of time, he still takes more than he should.
Yeah, and he has been under pressure a decent amount this year. Not a concerning amount, probably, but he's faced pressure. He's gotten hit a few times in the pocket. He's had guys in his face, and there's probably just some of that is just reps, and it's just when you're in practice, you're not going to get hit. You're wearing that black jersey. They're not going to hit you, so you're hanging on to that ball probably a little bit longer. It probably is just a game reps thing for him at this point, I would think. That, before this, he's always been able to rely on his just athletic ability to get away and make plays and not have it become an issue. Now that you're playing it in the Big Ten and you've got better teams, faster defenses, better opponents, the clock is going to have to speed up at some point, but that seems like that's something that's probably just the more he does it, the better that's going to get. I would be a little bit surprised if week 11, week 12, we were talking and having this same kind of conversation.
The linebackers at Michigan State are pretty darn good as well. Joe Bacci, the all Big Ten middle linebacker, gets a lot of the pub. But Antoine Simmons, the star, who is like the weak side linebacker in their defense, is in the backfield. He might be leading the Big Ten in tackles for loss right now.
Yeah, he's got 7.5 tackles for loss. It's not a leader, but it's
right behind Chase Young. And they'll blitz him, and he can cover, and he's not the biggest guy, but he was also a former Ohio State commit from Ann Arbor High School. could walk to Michigan Stadium from his high school and decommitted from Ohio State, signed with Michigan State. And he has been, I think he's had like over 30 tackles each of his first 2 years. And now he's a starter, and he's a really productive guy. So they're going to have to find him all over the place, and he'll be matching up with the Ohio State running backs, and that'll be a good contest to watch between those guys. You've got Simmons, who's fast. You got Bacci, who's just the typical Michigan State middle linebacker, who is going to pose probably, I'm thinking over-under for him is probably 10.5 tackles in this game and more. If he has more than that, that might be bad news for Michigan State, because it just means Ohio State is running successfully, and it's going to be one of those Chris Spielman 29 tackles in a loss against Michigan. Yeah, you've got 29 tackles, but you couldn't get off the field.
Right, 29. Yeah, if he's at 15 tackles or something like that, that means that Ohio State is not just running a lot of plays, but they're running the ball up the middle a lot, which means if they're doing that consistently, that means they're able to run the ball up the middle a lot. Because that's generally not 15 tackles and 6 for loss. That's 15 tackles and 1 for loss, which means 14 tackles for not a loss, which, I mean, he is at 46 tackles right now through 5 games, so almost like 8, 9 a game. So that's probably about right. He'll end up somewhere in that range. He's just like, that's a defense that I could see Tuff Borland being the middle linebacker for that team, and just, that kind of player, that kind of role, very good, fundamentally sound linebacker, has been one of their best players on a very good defense for, this is at least the 3rd year now. I mean, he's someone who will, other coaches will look at him and go, oh, that's a guy that we would love to have on our team. Like, he's just one of those guys. So, yeah, but you're right. Michigan State wants him to have a good game, but not too good a game.
And that's where Ohio State's defense, you look at their leading tacklers, and it might be like Malik Harris or Jordan Fuller, are like 4.5, 5 tackles a game, and it's because they get off the field. They've got a lot of 3 and outs. They roll in players, they rotate, so they don't rely on just one guy, and he's not out there for 80 snaps on defense because they can't get off the field. And this Michigan State front 7 is productive. I think there is room to do stuff in the secondary, and we saw Michigan State against Indiana, where Michael Penix completed at one point 20 passes in a row and was able to make some headway in that passing game. The corners got taken advantage of a little bit, where you've got a guy like I think it was Josiah Scott, who might be 5'10", got taken advantage of by bigger receivers like Donovan Hale last week. Ohio State can do that because they've got, like a 6'4" Benjamin Victor and a 6-foot Garrett Wilson, who plays like he's 6'9" and has a size advantage over even NBA power forwards. Tom can go up and get it. And there's been some opportunity for teams to throw the ball against this no-fly zone. And I'm wondering if, like, say Ohio State, they're going to come out and try to run the ball, I expect. But say they can't move the ball after the first series, I wonder if they start throwing the ball to open up the run.
That seems like something that they may just want to come out and do that and not be too predictable right off the bat. Because it seems like you would probably tend towards the thinking that, that the offensive line has been able to push people off the ball. If they can continue to push people off the ball, you just stick with what works, and therefore, but that also makes you kind of predictable, and you don't want to have lose the toss, get the ball, come out, go 3 and out, give the ball right back to Michigan State, get the crowd out of it a little bit. I mean, you don't want to do that. Justin Fields has done a good enough job taking care of the ball so far this season that maybe they feel like they can trust him to do. You don't go crazy, but your first down play, run some play action. See if you can get them to suck up. See if they, maybe if they're going to really sell out, try and stop the run. Try and put those guys, in one-on-one outside. Try and hit something big off the bat. And, I mean, you mentioned Josiah Scott as a corner who could be going up against Ben Victor. I looked it up. He's listed at 5'10", which means he's probably 5'8.5", something like that. So, yeah, I mean, there is stuff that Ohio State can take advantage of outside if they want to. And I can't imagine Michigan State is going to be geared up to stop the pass coming out. That just doesn't seem, it seems like they're going to want to come out, stop the run. That's generally mission number one for pretty much every defense. So go ahead and try and capitalize on doing something that they're not geared up to specifically try and stop.
Yeah, and it wouldn't surprise me to see them open up as they do with in 12 personnel with the 2 tight ends under center and go immediately to some play action and try to get these aggressive safeties to bite on that stuff. And because they will be defending, they'll be playing run first.
Yeah.
And David Dowell, who's been around for a long time, I think it was like All Big Ten maybe 2 years ago, then got hurt.
Yeah, he was a third-team All Big Ten last year. Yeah.
And then, so watching him, he had some issues against Indiana in coverage where he got beat a couple times in the slot. And not that KJ Hill is the fastest guy, but he could maybe have some success there. And we've even seen them when they have like trips left or trips right, where you've got different guys and that can be that slot guy. Could pose some problems for either of Michigan State's safeties and really the entire passing game, provided they can give Justin Fields time. And I do expect them to roll out, get some of those easy yardage gains on those out routes for 8-10 yards, just really easy. And then you're at 2nd and 2, 2nd and 3.
Yeah.
And you can do whatever you want. And as long as they stay ahead of the chains like that, then Michigan State's defense is going to be in trouble, because even if they're not going to give up a whole bunch of points, if Ohio State is moving the chains, they won't need to score 45 to win this game.
No. This seems like a game that if Ohio State gets to 30, they're probably in great shape. And if they get to 27 or 28, they're probably in pretty good shape. And
yep.
And I think the over/under is something like 50. So
is it really?
I think it's something like that. And I think that the combination of the Vegas line and the point spread was something like Ohio State 35, Michigan State 14 or 15, something like that. So, I mean, that's you're probably going to end up somewhere in that neighborhood. That's probably not a bad guess. If Ohio State scored 48 points this weekend, that would be pretty shocking. Like last weekend was impressive, but it wasn't like completely out of the question that they could get to 48 points. The fact that they got to 48 points as quickly as they did and then stopped, that was a little surprising. But the final score actually being 48, it was like, yeah, you could. We had people on their staff picks who picked them to score 48 or more points.
Yeah, and that was something we said we could even see going into the 60s if they wanted to. It could be one of those games.
Yeah, this weekend I don't think this is going to be a weekend when they're going to be able to name their score to the degree that they could have named their score before.
Would 48 points this week be more impressive than the starters giving up just 91 yards of total offense to Nebraska last week? Because that was very impressive. Mm-hmm. And I think I'd go with the 48 points. But I still think that performance by the first-team defense against that Nebraska offense, although the Huskers really had no chance because of the mismatch up front.
Right.
So, yeah, I'll side with the 48 points here. But the 91 yards to that offense is significant. So when we look at the matchup for the Michigan State offense and the Ohio State defense here, I'll set the over-under at 60 yards of total offense for the Michigan State Spartans. I just don't see how they put up enough yards and enough points. I don't see any way unless Ohio State helps them. And that's what was needed last week, and it didn't happen. Ohio State would need to give Michigan State some short yardage situations or some turnovers in the end zone.
Yeah, give them a short field or
They just don't have enough of an offense to deal with this Ohio State defense for 4 quarters, assuming, and Ryan Day said today, we're going to see 4 quarters. This is going to be it. He promised, as he promised last week and probably 2 weeks before.
I mean, technically, we have seen 4 quarters each week. Technically.
True.
Except for the Miami game. That got cut a little short.
Yes. But I think this I don't even know if it will be a fourth quarter game at this point, but I don't see Michigan State having the offense needed to make this as maybe as close as people would like.
No, this is not. This is another game where it seems like a lot would have to go wrong for Ohio State to make this a close game for 60 minutes. It's possible. They could have a bad game. You could have a couple bad bounces. Michigan State could hit just enough, trick plays, crazy plays, whatever.
50-50 balls.
You win some 50-50 balls that you score a few times, and Ohio State turns it over a couple times, and then Michigan State's got to score in the 20s, and then Ohio State has to get, 28, 31, 35. But that involves multiple things going wrong, probably. Michigan State is probably going to have, this could be the Indiana game where it's like, they hit a big trick play for a touchdown, and, Mark D'Antonio is known for his fake field goals and, something like that. But it just doesn't seem like this is an offense that's going to be able to drive the ball consistently, put together those 60, 70, 80-yard drives. Like, that just doesn't seem like that's something they're going to be able to do more than once or twice. So, again, if Ohio State takes care of the ball, Ohio State's probably fine this weekend.
Mm-hmm. Brian Lewerke last year wasn't in any condition to lead this team into anything. He had a bad shoulder. He's healthy this year. He's a mobile guy. He is completing just under 60% of his passes. I think he's thrown 10 touchdowns to one interception.
One interception, yep.
So he's taking care of the ball in that way. I don't know if he's fumbling it or not. I haven't been able to watch enough. But they've got a situation on the offensive line that I was trying to read about it this week, and frankly, it's hard to keep up because like two guys who were supposed to be left tackle are both out. The guy they got there now is not injured and is playing, but then they also got a new guy at right tackle, and then this guy's shifted over here at left guard, and they've got this and that. And what I'm reading all of this is I'm seeing like just blood dripping down the screen.
Yeah, I don't know. Does Ohio State have any good defensive ends this year? I forget.
I would have to, let me Google that. Can you just vamp, Tom?
Yeah,
vamp.
So defensive ends line up across the line from the offensive linemen. This is one of those things where we had this conversation last week with the Nebraska game, and it was like Nebraska has this great skill position talent, and they might be able to hit a big play here or there because they have players that are like Ohio State caliber skill players. But if your offensive line can't hold up, like, you're not going to be able to do anything consistently. You're not going to be able to sustain drives. You're not going to be able to stay in the field. You're not going to be able to run the ball. You're not going to be able to hit any kind of downfield passing, and because you've got to be able to buy your quarterback 3.5 seconds in the pocket to let those receivers get 15, 20 yards down the field. If you can't run the ball and you can't give your quarterback 3.5 seconds in the pocket with, backup offensive tackles going against Chase Young, nope, that's not going to work well. That not only keeps you from running the ball, that also limits your passing game to the kind of right at the line of scrimmage kind of flare screens and bubble screens and that kind of stuff, and maybe a quick slant or something like that. And with the way the Ohio State secondary is tackling this year, those plays are like, yep, okay, you just completed a pass and you got 5 yards out of it. You have not seen people hitting those quick hitters and then breaking a tackle and turning it into a 15, 20, 25 yard game like they have in the past. That is not a winning. That is not a winning strategy against this Ohio State defense.
The corners, all of them are triggering so fast, and they're getting on those wide throws, they're getting to the ball almost at the same time as the guy is starting to catch the ball and turn around and try to go upfield. And, those are being tackled for no gain a lot of times. Now, in terms of giving Brian Lewerke time, Michigan State leads the Big Ten in fewest sacks allowed. That's 4 in 5 games. Indiana didn't get to him last week. Northwestern got to him twice, and I think Arizona State once, and maybe Tulsa once. So he's been pretty clean. I could see him getting sacked 4 times this week alone, and being one of those things where here's another thing: Ohio State hasn't had to really blitz much.
Right.
Adrian Martinez
put $1 in the jar.
Yes. Adrian Martinez got sacked by Malik Harrison. Last week on a play that he got flushed out of the pocket up into the pocket, and Malik Harrison was there to clean it up. And that's not really a blitz; that's just a cleanup, This week, maybe we see more of it. There's really been no reason, and like you said, when the secondary is tackling as well as it is, why even bother taking chances? But if this offensive line somehow is as good as they are supposedly on these on protecting the quarterback, maybe you do some extra things. But they haven't. The best defensive ends they faced have been Northwestern's because they've got some pass rushers.
Yeah,
and you saw what happened. They got to him a couple times. That pass rush did. So they're going to face even better guys this time around. And I really have a hard time thinking that the Buckeyes won't get after him 3 or 4 times and bring him down this week because I don't know what I think they're averaging around 4 sacks per game. Ohio State this year.
Yeah, it's right around there.
The tops in the nation. So I can go one under that and say I 3, but he's also a guy who can escape stuff. And really, it's not just the sacks that matter.
Right.
Because we saw interceptions come from near sacks last week. It's just it's the pressure that's important. And I don't see any way Michigan State stops that this week.
Right. And here's Michigan State. You mentioned Northwestern. Here's what they did against Northwestern on offense. 2.7 yards per rush, 40 carries, 109 yards.
Yeah.
That's if they can't run on Northwestern, they're not going to be able to run on Ohio State. And the pressure didn't necessarily get to Lewerke, but he was only 18 for 31.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just if you're 18 for 31. It was 228 yards, so he hit some big plays, but there were a whole lot of nothing. That's if you're completing under 60% of your passes and you can't run the ball against Ohio State, then you're into basically the same thing we talked about with Nebraska last week. You're going to have to be +3 in turnovers or get a bunch of a bunch of kind of fluky plays or a couple picks, not just get turnovers, but score on turnovers, pick sixes, fumble recoveries, that kind of stuff. Because otherwise if you can't run the ball and you can't consistently pass the ball, it's like you need to have basically a 2016 Penn State game where it's like they blocked a punt for a touchdown and they blocked a field goal. Yeah. And I mean, and the odds of that happening are not real high.
And Lewerke, every time we've seen him, healthy or not, when against Ohio State, where he's throwing the ball, and you have no confidence, you have no concerns that he's going to hurt you throwing the ball because he's just so erratic at times. And I'm looking at his line from 2017, where Ohio State came in and won 48-3. He was 18 of 36 for 131 yards and 2 interceptions. And then last year, that was when he was healthy, Tom.
Yeah.
Last year, when he was not, he was 11 of 28. 128 yards with an interception. No touchdown in either of those games, as we know, because they have not scored a touchdown in a while against the Buckeyes. So throwing the ball, it's not like he's been outstanding this year, and I don't expect him to be better than he has been. And so this season with this defense, you cannot expect opponents to exceed their average against this defense. You have to expect them to not reach that and fall quite short of that. And that's why, again, unless something crazy happens and he plays better than he has or Ohio State gives him the ball, you can't expect too much from Lewerke this week.
No, this is we've talked about this with, kind of trying to contextualize Ohio State stats in some of these big games where, they're running for 7-something yards per carry. And it's like, well, okay, if you're playing at Clemson, you got to scale that down to about 5. Okay, so you ran for 2.7 yards per carry against Northwestern. How much would you like to scale that down against Ohio State? I mean, the actual answer is at that point it almost doesn't matter because if you are running for 2.7 yards per carry or 1.7 yards per carry, functionally that doesn't really make a difference because either way your run game is basically a non-factor. And this is 3 years in a row that Michigan State has not done anything through the air against Ohio State. 2016, I'm just looking back at that box score now because we talked about last year. Last year was injured Lewerke, plus it was about minus 1 million degrees and windy and snowing and miserable in East Lansing, so it wasn't going to be an easy time to throw. But 2 years ago was the week after the Iowa game when they just got put in a blender for 60 minutes and scored 3 points. Year before that, they were 8 for 21 for 127 yards. I mean, 6.0 yards per attempt. That's not great. And 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. I mean, this is an offense that has not done anything meaningful against Ohio State in the careers of any of these players that have been at Michigan State. And with the Ohio State defense playing as well as it has, I don't see any real reason to expect that to change this week.
And we know Ryan Day is talking to his team about what Michigan State has done to Ohio State in the past, and Mark D'Antonio will be doing that as well. But it's still going to come down to this Michigan State offense has to make enough plays to make this a game. And they've got some players at receiver that can do some things. But I right now I have so much faith in this Ohio State secondary that they could be throwing out like Plaxico Burress, Felton Davis, Charles Rogers, and I think Ohio State would still have a pretty good chance.
I mean, a lot of those guys are like 40 now, so I mean,
a very good chance. They would trigger on those guys, and you'd hear like my hip. And but Darryl Stewart is having a good year. He's a guy that they just the work he can throw the ball up to him, and he'll go get it. We haven't really seen that be a successful measure against Ohio State this season.
No.
For one, you've got to have the time to get deep. For two, these corners, and I still think Damon Arnett is being underrated. I know everybody loves Jeff Okudah. I don't think anybody on this defense is playing better than Damon Arnett. Maybe Chase Young, but Arnett has been amazing.
Yeah, I think we came into the year with the expectation that there's a pretty good chance Jeff Okudah was going to be a first-round pick next year. Damon Arnett's working his way into that conversation, and if he's not a first-round pick, maybe he's a second-round pick. I mean, he is – there are guys who have come back to Ohio State for their senior year, and it's like, maybe we've been better off. Nope. Damon Arnett has – congratulations to Chris Carter. He gave some good advice because this – Damon Arnett has made himself some money this year.
But we said that on the podcast. I remember when he announced he was coming back, and you had some Ohio State fans who were upset. We told you on this show that this is a good thing.
Yeah.
This is a very good thing. You're returning a fifth-year senior cornerback with experience, and now you're seeing it. Just as we predicted, he is playing very well, just as we predicted.
The interesting part of that is, okay, the why, because this is his 5th year. And, a lot of times the difference between a guy's 4th year and a 5th year, kind of the learning curve has really flattened out at that point. You see a lot of jump from the 1st year to the 2nd year, and then it sort of slowly starts to flatten out. To take a huge leap like that this year, my initial inclination would be, well, Jeff Hafley, Matt Barnes, I mean, new coaching, making a big difference for him, and whether that's just better teaching or just a better relationship, whatever it is, that's a piece there. The other piece of it, though, you got to give some of the credit to Damon Arnett, because Damon Arnett, we've talked to a number of people who've talked about how much he's matured. Yeah. I mean, including Damon Arnett himself, that he has matured a lot.
It's mature of him to be able to talk about it as he does.
Yeah, because he basically says he was a little bit of a knucklehead before this. He has grown up a lot this year. He's probably putting a little bit more focus on it. I mean, this is a contract year for him, so that certainly helps keep your focus on it. But he is putting in the work. He is putting in the time. He is learning from the coaches. I mean, not every cornerback in that room has made the same kind of leap Damon Arnett has this year. So the credit probably gets divided up a little bit between Hafley and Barnes and Arnett, but
and us.
Well, I mean, obviously, I mean, we know they listen, so. It's there is plenty of credit to go around because that's a substantial. I mean, he's made a substantial enough group that it's not like, well, he's gotten marginally better. Like, no, he has made a major leap. And we're talking about Arnett and Okudah. We could basically have the same conversation with Shaun Wade too.
Yep. And I don't know if you and I have talked about this, but I've been mentioning it this week to anybody who will listen. This trio of cornerbacks is playing as well as the 2016 trio, which might be the best in school history of Denzel Ward, Marshawn Lattimore, and Garyon Conley. And it's crazy to think that is possible. But these guys, there's no weak spot. There's no thing that they're not good at. Mm-hmm. There's no issues of any kind. They sound tackling. They're great in coverage. They don't let guys off the line if they don't want them off the line. They have adapted to playing zone, to dropping back. And these are all guys who would have never thought about. You don't tell them, hey, you're coming to Ohio State to play zone. That's not why they came here. They came here to play man press coverage. And you see the way each of them has blossomed in this role. And I give so much credit to Jeff Hafley, but also obviously the players, because if they don't buy in, then none of it matters.
Well, Wade talked about that on Wednesday night. We got a chance to talk to him. And he said they still are a press man team.
Yeah.
This is not, they haven't gone away from that, but they're mixing in some zone. And, the way he explained it, basically, they're still a press man team, but they're playing enough zone that you see the quarterback, when the quarterback sees zone, the quarterback kind of goes, oh crap. And then you're not getting the look you expected. So whatever you thought you were going to do with the ball, you can't do that because that's being taken away. And also you've got all these guys who are looking at you. Because if you're in man, you're looking at the receiver. If you're in zone, you can look at the quarterback. You can track his eyes a little better. You've seen more turnovers this year. I mean, we anticipated for sure that they were going to have more interceptions than they did last year. They're well on their way to that this year. And that is a big part of it. But they're less predictable than they were last year. They're still fundamentally the same central tenets of the defense remain true, but they're so much less predictable, which makes them so much more dangerous.
And they all know what they're doing. The Michigan State running game, you mentioned it a little bit ago. Connor Hayward hit the transfer portal, so they're down a couple of running backs, actually, and relying on redshirt freshman Eli Collins, who has played well, but, I mean, he's kind of up and down, and I don't expect him to be this dynamic guy who rushes for 160 yards on Ohio State and they have no answer for. And, of course, as we know, this Ohio State defense doesn't take long to find answers, which is another credit to the coaches. And then the coaches credit the players for being smart enough to implement what they want to do. And really, when you look at this entire Michigan State offense, they just don't match up well with the Ohio State defense, because the Ohio State defense can come out and dominate a spread team. They can come out and dominate a team that is just a pro-style team, basically, because that may be even easier for them. I don't know what it means for Sean Wade and what that means for the Bullet, or do they go some 4-4-3, which they've done a little bit of, oddly enough. That's one of the, I guess, the interesting points of this defense, and probably one of the things that opponents hate about it, is you don't know exactly what you're going to get, but what you're going to get is going to be sound fundamentally and technically. Right.
You're going to get probably a little bit of a different look, but all of the different looks have real good football players who know what they're doing and who understand the system that what they're being asked to do, but kind of understand the system as well and what everyone else is being asked to do. And they, at this point, understand that everyone else knows what they're doing, so they can trust each other. So they don't need to try and do three different people's jobs. I mean, that's something we've heard in the past, like guys trying to do too much and not trusting someone else to do their job. So then they start cheating over to do the other person's job, and then they're not doing their job. You haven't had any of that this year. No. And I mean, you talked about teams not being a great matchup for this Ohio State defense. Like, what team is a great matchup for this Ohio State defense? Like, who looks at this Ohio State defense and goes, oh yeah, we got loads of stuff we can do against these guys?
I don't know, and I guess that's the reason this defense is here.
Yeah.
That way it can handle whatever you want and handle it well. And you just have to have the culture where you've got players who are okay with, this might not be my week. Mm-hmm. And maybe, but you stick around, and at some point you get called upon and you come in and you make a play and you succeed, and it was all worth it. And that doesn't just happen overnight. The new defense may have come in technically overnight, but what allows it to be so unselfish has been brewing for a while and being built for a while. And that's still part of Urban Meyer's touch around here, and Ryan Day obviously taking it and clearly made it better, as we're all seeing. And as we saw on the road against a Big Ten West team, I mean, clearly things are better. I'm wondering, Tom, as we just look back and forth at what the possibilities are for this game. If I say, what's Ohio State's over-under on rushing total? If I go like 167,
I would probably take the under on that. Probably. If they rush for 167 yards,
feel pretty good.
They're probably winning and covering, and I think that they are going to have to pass it. If they can just run the ball off the jump and just run the ball and go right down the field and have one of those 10-play, 60-yard kind of drives and 8 of the plays are rushes, nope, that's it. Good night.
Make them number one in the nation now.
I don't think that that's what's going to happen. I think they're going to have to. This could be a game where Ohio State finishes with 330 yards of total offense, and it's kind of balanced, and 150 yards rushing and 180 yards passing or something like that. And that would be a perfectly respectable game, and they probably win that game, and it would probably feel like a disaster to people who are used to Ohio State just beating everyone by 40. This is what we've talked about several weeks in a row now. It just keeps getting a little gradually more difficult. Little bit more difficult each week. This is a little bit more of a challenge than Nebraska, personnel-wise anyway. Yeah. I mean, the fact that it's at home helps a lot. It's not a road game. It's not a night game. You remove a lot of those kind of uncertainties. But this is a game that Michigan State can just kind of turn it into a little bit of a rock fight, bloody up a little bit, make it. Michigan State might not be able to take your win, but they have a chance to take your style points.
Yeah,
for sure.
It could be a 2010 game that's never really in doubt.
Mm-hmm.
It just, you look at the final score at the end on the scroll and you're like, whoa, Ohio State nearly lost. It's like, well, there was never actually, that was never the case. It's just, you throw some, they just don't have good ingredients, Michigan State, to build a nice looking cake for the opponent.
Yeah, Ohio State could win this game by 2 touchdowns and have Michigan State never be above about 10% in win probability in the second half. They'd never have the ball with a chance to tie. They never have the ball across midfield within 2 score, that kind of thing.
Like a 2007 Michigan game.
Yeah.
Where Michigan has no offense, has no hope because Chad Henne is so beaten up that there's just really no concern. Or, I guess, a 2017-18 Michigan State game with Brian Lewerke last year or whatever. But, anything else, Tom? I think we're looking forward to a very good game. I don't know if it's going to be 4 quarters. Although, you know what, Tom? It will be 4 quarters because if it's 20-10 or something like that, you're not taking anybody out. You're just going to make sure that it stays at that point, and you don't even really want to risk anything, especially at like 24-6 or something like that. You don't want to. Actually, don't even go to a 24-6 score. Just avoid whatever that score was, 24-9, whatever it was. Just avoid any of those football god things. I expect to see this being a 4-quarter game. I don't expect it to be decided in the 4th quarter, but I would also not be surprised if it's just another 3-quarter game.
Yeah, I mean, this could be a 10-point game at halftime or a 2-touchdown game at half-time. And then Ohio State scores once more in the 3rd quarter, and then it's kind of functionally done. Yeah, like a 31-10 or something in that neighborhood.
All right, well, Tom, you mentioned it. Why don't you go ahead and let's get to our score predictions before you give yours. Last night I gave mine. I went 34-13. Oh, okay. Now this is also a game where I would never touch. It's a 20-point line. I would never.
Yeah.
I don't like that at all. And yet, my score is still to cover, although 31-13 is probably more realistic, but I will go 34-13 at this point because I'm buying into the Ohio State offense. But if I'm going to go 34, you almost just, what's one more score? What's one more touchdown? Keep that 40-point thing alive, but I'm not going 40 against these Spartans.
Yeah, I haven't put together a prediction thing yet, but it's something in that 28-10, 31-10 kind of range is probably about right, where Michigan State probably does something at some point, and whether that's a pick six or that's a short field touchdown or a trick play or something, they score something at some point, but can't really sustain anything at any point, at any other point during the game. And Ohio State just kind of does enough. They can't, have a bunch of 50-second touchdown drives like they have in other games, 45-second, 50-second touchdown drives. you're going to have to sustain some things. You have to put together some 8-10 play drives. So you're just, the game's going to be moving a little slower. Michigan State's going to be doing what they can to keep the clock moving, shorten the game. So I don't think they get to 40 this week. I know this feels like every week I'm picking a low score, and then they exceed it by 2 touchdowns.
Exactly.
And it's like, at some point, they're not going to do that. And against a team like Michigan State that has a pretty good defense, that seems like as good a guess as any that it's either going to be the Michigan State game, the Northwestern game, or the Wisconsin game, where Ohio State finishes with a score in the 20s, and it's nerve-wracking in the fourth quarter for Ohio State fans.
Yeah, I think as long as Ohio State scores, say, 23, they're going to be fine, because Michigan State can't score 23 because that's technically like 5 scoring drives.
10 safeties and a field goal.
So I think we both expect the Buckeyes to be all right, but that doesn't mean this isn't going to be their stiffest test, because it will be. And even if it isn't, it still is. And as I've said before, maybe these are not all, but maybe these are performances against good teams. Mm-hmm. And maybe this is just how good Ohio State is. And if they do offensively what they did in Nebraska last week defensively, I think that's going to be maybe the loudest message sent this year in college football.
Yeah, you're getting to the point that you can't ignore what Ohio State is doing anymore. I mean, I'm sure that if they do hang,
they will try.
Yeah, I'm sure if this ends up 42-3, there will be people who say, well, clearly Michigan State wasn't that good.
And that's the problem with beating teams so badly, is you make them look bad in the process.
Right. And you're gonna get to the point where at some point it becomes undeniable. You're probably not to the undeniable point for the national audience yet. If they do it again this weekend, like you're pretty much getting there for everyone outside of Bristol, Connecticut, and the Sun Belt of the South. You're probably getting there for pretty much everyone else.
Yep, I would agree. So that will do it for today's show. Thank you all for listening. We will talk to you next time from Ohio Stadium at 1 in the morning, midnight, something of that nature. So get your rest that day. I would sleep in, take a nap midday. You don't need to watch college football. You need to stay up to listen to the show after you watch the Buckeyes. Make sure to check out theozone.net for all of stuff, all of the preview coverage from this week, and check out the rest of the shows on the Ozone Radio Network, Mondays and Fridays with the Buckeye Sloopcast, and then Tuesdays, obviously, with the Silver Bullets podcast, and then us every other time that we do this from here at beautiful Woody Hayes Athletic Center. So we will talk to you guys on Saturday.